Уважаемые участники форума, добрый день. Разрешите открыть сессию «Финансовые рынки и драгоценные металлы». Сессия является новой для формата форума. Актуальность тематики сессии обусловлена объективными обстоятельствами, массовым приходом.
There's a new session for our forum, and this is due to objective reasons. So we see that there are many investors in the financial market, and there is an enhanced interest on their part against the pandemic times. So, on the other hand, we have seen this rapid development in the markets and qualitatively and quantitatively. So we see that new tools have been developed and new innovations have been taken on to improve conditions for both companies and individuals. So let me introduce the panelists. The opening report will be delivered by Zhao Fanhua, General Manager, Shanghai Gold Exchange International, that will give an overview of the respective market. Vladimir Kredev, Executive Director, AMSC Finex, Alexander Kredev, Portfolio Manager with Tinkoff Capital, Sergei Shavil, Executive Director, Global Markets at Russian Agricultural Bank, Igor Savelyev, Head of Trading Operations and with the Precious Metals Department at the Asia Pacific Ocean Bank, Mr. Kovalov, the Director for Commodities Market at the Department of the Investment Product at the VTB Bank. And we would also like to share the information about the Russian market of precious metals. So we have a very prominent panel, and they will enlighten us on the market tools and conditions, and also we will be talking about the new opportunities and to develop trade in precious metals, both domestically and abroad. So we would like to start our session giving the floor to Zhao Fanhua.
尊敬的主持人瓦西里总裁以及各位线上线下的来宾朋友们，大家好！非常高兴能够应俄罗斯全国金融协会的邀请，参加2021年俄罗斯贵金属论坛，与来自全球的各位嘉宾相聚在云会场，共享黄金市场发展的新成果和新思考，探讨未来发展之道。2020年以来，新冠肺炎疫情的大流行给全球经济和金融市场带来了极其深远的影响。面对新的风险与挑战，中俄两国保持着密切的交流与合作，携手并进，共克时艰。今年恰逢中俄两国签署《中俄睦邻友好合作条约20周年》，咫尺良机。上金所很高兴通过俄罗斯贵金属论坛这个平台，与大家分享中国黄金市场的发展及中俄黄金市场合作愿景。中国已连续多年成为全球最大的黄金生产国和消费国。虽然在2020年受新冠疫情影响，中国黄金产量及消费量均出现一定程度的下降，分别为365.34吨及820.98吨，但仍位列全球首位。今年前3季度，中国黄金消费量出现显著上升，达到813.59吨，与2020年同期相比增长48.44%，较疫情前2019年同期增长5.89%。3季度以来，国内黄金消费继续延续上半年恢复态势，实现同比较快增长。黄金价格的下跌及促消费政策等多重因素带动下，黄金首饰消费复苏势头迅猛，古法金饰品表现依旧抢眼，金条及金币销量也保持稳健，显著高于疫情前水平。2020年，上金所有效保障疫情防控，稳步推动业务开展，市场运行平稳有序，清算交割安全顺畅，交易规模持续增长，市场服务功能进一步增强。去年黄金白银交易量均居全球交易所市场第3位，总交易金额43.32万亿元。 同比增长
золота и
56.66%，
серебра по
其
объему
中黄
торгов
金
в
成交量
2020 году
5.87 万
шеврон
吨，
достиг
白银成交量
43,32 триллиона евро, что на
411.47 万吨，铂金成交
50%
量
больше, чем в 2019
84.32
году.
吨。
Также, в частности, объем торгов
因疫情
золотом
影响，
составил
去年国内实物金
5730
销售受
тонн,
到冲
серебром
击，出现
4,21
黄金现
миллиона
货需
метрических
求
тонн, а
不
платина
足，供给相
84,32
对过剩的
тысячи
情
тонн.
况。
В
而国际市场受
2020
避险
году
需求
продажа
和
золота
实
в
物
России
流
из-за
通不
вспышки
上等
объема
因素
доминантных
影
привело к
响，
избытку предложения
对
на
黄
рынке.
金
Это
的
не
需求
транслировалось
比较
высоким
旺盛，
спросом на золото
导
на
致国
международных
内外
рынках.
价差
В
走低，
результате сдержанных
国内
настроений
价
за
格
риски и
贴水。
неэффективного
今年
продвижения
以来，伴随着
физических
黄金
активов.
需
Как
求的强
следствие,
劲
мы
反
видим, что
弹，
спред между
实物黄
внутренними и
金进
международными
口量
ценами
显著增长，
сохранился и
价
в
差
конце
逐
стал
渐回归
дисконтированным по
至疫
сравнению с
情前水
международным.
平。
Начало этого года,
在
на
国际
фоне
版业务
активного
方面，
ослабления
2020
спроса
年国际版
на
交易
золото,
规模
объем
大
импорта
幅增长，
физического золота
年成交
значительно
金额
увеличился. На
8.26
международном
万
биржевом
亿
рынке
元，
общий объем
同
торгов в
比增
2020
长
году вырос и достиг
125.24%。
8,25
今年以
триллиона.
来，随着
То есть
黄
мы
金
видим
价
прирост
格
на
的回落，
120%.
国际版
В
成交量有
2021
所
году
下
объем
降，
торговли
但在
международным
需求
биржевым
的
рынке
推动
сократился
下，
снижение
黄
цен
金
за
进口
золото.
量
Однако
显
объем
出
импорта
现显
золота
著上
увеличился.
升。
В
截
результате
止10
высокого
月
спроса
底，
на
国际版
физическое
实物
золото
黄金进
и
口
к концу
量达
октября
到
объем торговли золотом на
242.24
международных
万
биржах
吨，
достиг
同比增长
2,42 миллионов
63.42%。
тонн и плюс 63,
在业务创新方
63,42%
面，
по
上金
сравнению с
国际积
прошлым
极
годом.
服务于
В
“一
плане
带一路”国
бизнес-инициатив
家倡
Инвестиционный
议，
совет
落实国
Совет
家
биржи
各项
золота
方
активно
针政策，
поддерживает
探
инициативы
索
по
国际化
ИСУ,
多元
реализует
多元
национальную
路径，
политику,
推进中国
активно
黄金市
исследует
场
различные
与
пути
国际市场的
транзитации,
融合。
способствует интеграции китайского
一
рынка
个是
золота
不
с
断丰
международным
富
рынком
黄金
золота.
之路项目
И
内
первое
涵，推动精
направление
密加
мы
工、复
говорим
出
как
口
раз
等
о
业务
запуске
模
бизнеса
式。
по реэкспорту
2019
золотых слитков для
年，
проекта
上金
«Золотой
所
путь».
为贯彻
Для
落实
реализации
国家
национальной
“一带一
инициативы
路”
по
倡
ИСУ
议， 以国际
шанхайская
版
биржа
为平
запустила
台，推
проект
出了黄金之
«Золотой
路
путь» в
项目，
2019 году,
旨在推
используя в
进中
качестве
国黄
платформы
金加工
Международный
制造
совет.
产能
Это
与
проект
“一带
направлен
一
на
路”沿线
сближение
国
спроса
家
на
和地
физическое
区
золото в регионе
黄金
по
实
ИСУ
物
пути и
供需
предложение
市
со
场
стороны
互联互
китайских
通。
горнодобывающих
项目上
компаний.
线以来，通过
Момента
模式
запуска
创新
проекта
和流程再造，
дефиниционного развития и
先后推
реструктуризации
出了
шанхайской
黄金
биржи
租赁
подспешно
加
внедряет
珠宝加
инновационные
工
виды
复出
бизнеса,
口、转
такие
口
как
贸
лизинг
易、
золота
标
при
准金锭
переработке
加工
внутренних
复
изделий,
出口
реэкспорт
以及
золота,
海
реэкспорт
外
после
黄金
переработки
原料
стандарта
加工
золотых
复出口
слитков
等业务
и
模式。
сырья из рубежа.
黄金之路
Проект
项目
«Золотой
切
путь»
实服务
эффективно
于中
удовлетворяет
国黄
потребности
金产
возобновления
业
производства
复
золота в
工
Китае
复产内在
и
需求，
закладывает основу для
并为
эффективного
推
баланса
动
между
中国
национальным
黄金
производством
优质产
высококачественного
能
золота
与
в
“一
Китае
带
и
一路”
высоким
沿
спросом
线
на физическое
旺
золото
盛
в
的
рамках
实金
по
需
ИСУ
求
пути.
有效对
Во-вторых,
接奠定基础。
это создание
第二
финансовой
是大力
инфраструктуры,
辐射金融基
продвижение
础设施建设，
расширение
推动国际版
также
FT 账户
услуг
海外联通。
финансовых транзакций в
国际版
зарубежных
以中
регионах,
国、澳门
начиная
为创新起点，
с Макао
将国际
и
版
наших
账户服务延
шанхайской
伸至
биржи
海
начинает
外。
распространять эти
FT
услуги
账户的延
в
伸
международный
进一步
совет на
降低了
зарубежные
全球
регионы.
客户
Распространение системы
参与国内
финансов
黄金市场的
операций
运营
позволило
成本，
снизить операционные
提
расходы
升了金融基础设
наших
施的服务能
представителей
级，
международных организаций
为
для
人民币
торговли
国
на
际化
китайском рынке
资本
золота.
项目跨境资
Расширить
金结算
возможности
提供了可
финансовых
借鉴的
беспечного
合作
подхода
新模式，
стабилизации юаня,
促进了贸易
бесконечным
投资
расчетом,
便利
тем
化。
самым облегчая процесс инвестирования
上
и
金所一
торговли.
直都是对外开
Шанхайская
放
биржа
合作
золота
共赢的
всегда
践行
была
者，
направлена на
并将坚定不移地
открытость и
推动
поиск
建立更加
общих
自由
решений,
高效的
а
全
также
球黄
стремится
金市
создать
场。
более свободный,
作为国家级
эффективный
贵
мировой
金属
рынок
交
золота.
易市场，
Для торговли
上海
на
黄金
шахтах
交易
торговли
所
драгоценными
长期
металлами
致力于
уникальным
金
уровнем.
融基础设施建
Шанхайская
设，
биржа золота
促进
взяла на
中
себя
国贵
обязательство
金属市
по
场的
развитию
平稳
финансовых
发展，
структур,
助力
содействия
中俄市场走向共同繁荣。
стабильному развитию
截止
китайского
目
рынка
前，
драгоценных
国际
металлов,
版共有
содействие
国际
также
会员94家，国
сближению
际
рынка
客
золота
户
Китая и
84
России,
家，
достижению
基本
общего
覆盖了
процветания.
全球重要的
Данный
金融机
совет
构和贵金属企业。
в состав Международного
在国际
совета
合作方面，
вводит
上金所在中俄总理定期会务委员会、金
международных
融 融合作分委会框架下，上金所积极推进与俄罗斯贵金属市场监管机构及市场主体交流讨论，探索跨市场合作模式，推动两国贵金属市场的共赢发展。目前，上金所国际会员中有4家俄罗斯机构，俄罗斯已有1家精炼厂成为上金所可提供标准精定企业。在跨市场合作方面，2018年及2020年，上金所分别与莫斯科交易所及俄罗斯全国金融协会签署谅解备忘录。今年以来，上金所积极推动与上述2家机构的合作，一是与莫斯科交易所积极沟通，深入推进双方库存互换合作项目的业务安排及各项准备工作；二是今年6月与俄罗斯全国金融协会共同举办友好合作、共享机遇中俄贵金属市场线上业务研讨会，来自中俄贵金属市场数百位代表参会。演讲嘉宾就两国市场发展情况、市场展望及合作机会等内容进行了探讨。我们希望通过与俄方进一步加强合作，为两国市场参与者建立信息沟通及交流的平台， 增进投资者对两国贵金属市场的了解，并积极推动两国黄金交易市场的联通，提升黄金实物在两地市场的交易及流转效率，深化两国黄金市场的资源优势互通。新冠疫情对全球政治经济带来了深刻影响，在后疫情时代，黄金市场仍然是机遇与挑战并存。面对新情况、新形势、新挑战，我们将继续加强彼此的合作交流，为全球黄金市场的繁荣发展贡献智慧和力量。谢谢大家。
Благодарю за внимание.
А что происходит с доступом к рынку золота для частных инвесторов?
Thank you very much for your presentation. So we are just talking about private investment, and that would be either exchange funds or private sons of Vladimir. So with that, I would like to give the floor to you, to gold, the way that it is used in the market. So to me, ETF, so as a tool, that's something that affects trade in gold. And now let me explain the way Russian investors, because private investors, so that they can use this ETF as a way to trade in gold. And I was kindly invited to this session, and the reason being that I'm a representative of FinX, so it was several months ago that we started the first ETF for gold in the Russian market, and this is one of the most popular tools among private investors. So we know that there are institutional investors and individual investors taking up the tool, and the turnover is rather high at the Moscow exchange. Also, the traceability of gold prices is very prominent. Now we know the details of the mechanics of ETF, so now we would like to approach this issue first from the global perspective, and then we'll speak about the specific details of the Russian market. So ETF go for gold, and that's exchange-traded products at large. And then, in addition to gold, apart from gold funds, we also have exchange-traded commodities. So those that are structured for other materials, and these will be similar to ETF. So they will be considered like as a single market, as a for ETF and ETP. So in this graph clearly shows a certain trend for the trade in gold in tons, exchange-traded products for tons. So we see that there's an upward trend, and it was very strong between 2015 to 2020, and there is a decline at the moment. So this decline is quite logical, and it is due to stabilization of prices for gold. So many investors that open up speculative trading transactions, so they wouldn't use this exposure to gold, because from gold will be shifting to shares and bonds to make their profit. Now let's look at the role of this gold-based ETF in the global ETF market, and that its role actually is not that significant. And this is not the case that there is no growth. Now we see that there is growth in tons and dollars as well, but overall, that increase in ETF usage as a tool, so it's very dramatic indeed. So over these years, we have seen $1 trillion for the global market. It stands at $10 trillion, that's $12 billion. So, of course, they look a bit insignificant against the background of this booming demand. So we see that the situation has stabilized, and that we do not anticipate any substantial increase going forward. However, so we know that within shares, so if they are losing their value, and then gold is seen as to-go commodity or go-to commodity, so this go-to commodity will be used, and this portfolios that are based on gold that can be used as a safe haven. So the typical advice would be having 15 to 20% of gold in their investment portfolio. So this is the traditional way. So if people get less optimistic about shares and the market, so they will be diverting more funds towards gold. So again, we're looking at the demand of the gold as at the zero level, and then when even it reached the level of 40%, so 40% was attributed to investment channels, so including ETF, so not from the industry and not from the jewelry, but it was the investment demand driven by ETF. So from time to time, we see that this ETF also demonstrates a high the cycle-based nature for gold, but the cyclicity is not that high at the moment. It's rather neutral. Now let me share these key characteristics with the Russian market and the example of an ETF that was started several years ago. So to me, it is a convenient tool that can be used by a private investor. So this is like a standard mechanism. It's you are buying an exchange-traded fund as a share. So you have this share that is linked to the value of gold. Just before our session, just went through the statistics, and if you just look at the statistic from the start of the year, so there is no delta, there is no spread between the two, so just the two go hand in hand virtually. So if you get a gold and you acquire it as a share, then you can use it for the purposes of accounting and taxation. So if you get the profit on the share and then that is in gold, then you can reduce your profit tax base. So this story is quite appealing to investors. So there's a low spreads and low entry threshold. Take Ireland as an example. So in Ireland, they have the Irish Foundation, RIFE, that's the abbreviation for this organization. So this the fund just actually has all the typical characteristics. So you see funds, but this is that includes only gold assets and does not and it is not subject to diversification requirements. So it is structured as the Irish fund, and this is just the first and the single institution that operating gold in the European Union. So other examples would be exchange-traded commodities or exchange-traded notes with a very low commission for the Russian market, and also a bit competitive in terms of Western markets, 45 basis points, and OP pension funds, and O category and B category. So that just the B category has this lower allowance level, so but it will be using a different mechanism. Nice Euronext and in Ireland, so this fund will have the listing. So and just from the outside, I outline that we're talking about gold. So this is physical gold. So you can see, like you can take your ingots. You can even see this number on those ingots. I mean, all physical properties will be presented in the reports, and this is just a snapshot of the inventory details. They report the way that it looks like with the ICBC standard banks in those ingots that are kept at the vault. So these details, I mean, that will be provided to all the customers. I mean, if you want to invest, just then you'll see what kind of ingots you'll get in return. So the role of gold is very actually popular among those instruments of trade, and this is the so-called popular portfolio with the Moscow exchange, and the 15% is the share of gold, which is a high interest indeed. So, and that's what we did, is just we build up this popular portfolio, some similar to the Moscow exchange, but based on the ETF that we produce. And obviously, so you see this FXGD, which is 15%. That's the share that the investor will find quite reasonable and comfortable to work with. So there is low volatility in the portfolio, and this can be increased. I mean, the portfolio can be increased, and to combine gold elements and other instruments as well. Just in a nutshell, I would like to talk about the prospects and opportunities and some questions that can be raised in that respect. So we're looking at those traditional commodities. However, gold, so over this past period between October 2020, so we haven't seen any significant growth. We know that it will catch up with the traditional, conventional commodities. So we just do not know, because we know that the gold is a non-conditional commodity, but some growth can be expected. So this is still an open question, and there is another open question as to what are we going to do against inflation pressure. So just different times, just gold was used differently to hedge against inflation, and currently, so the inflation rate in many developed and emerging markets, including Russia and the United States, so there is inflation rates are high. However, there is no acceleration in gold prices at the same time. So we take gold as a good and strong hedge, then we'll see that gold prices will go up. That's it from.
Thank you so much, Vladimir. That was very interesting. And I think it's going to be just as interesting to compare that situation with the Russian mutual fund, which are exchange traded. So you launched a fund, and not only for gold, but also others that you added. I would like to ask you, can you tell us about those funds and profiles of private investors that invest in them, and how do you select them? Let me be brief about this, and I will describe the profile of a private investor today that invests in gold, providing an example of clients of Tinkoff Capital. To get started, so which investors invest in gold? Conservative investor that tries to preserve their savings from inflation or recessions or geopolitical shocks. So might be moderate investors, those who make sure that 10 to 15% of their portfolio is allocated to gold. And for those investors, we have Tinkoff Gold fund, so you can buy their shares from shares of that fund. So it has physical gold that we buy at Moscow Exchange. But what is notable here, physical volumes in kilograms of gold is smaller than the volume of physical gold in other funds which also have gold, and we have 3 of them. So it's a venture portfolio strategy. So that includes 4 different classes of assets in equal shares, short-term and long-term, bonds and gold. So those funds are larger and they have more physical gold in them. Why is it this way? In our opinion, private investors has a lot of demand for standard out-of-box strategies. Investors join the market and they're not buying separate instruments that they want to buy a whole portfolio in one click. So in recent years, many new investors joined the market. Some of them worked well, some others not so well. And there was a new generation of investors, among others, those who had never invested in stock market before, and they don't want to leave the market. but they want to participate going forward. So we have those portfolios for them. An example is this client who works in IT, and throughout the day at work he teaches neural works to recognize voice, but then in the evening he pushes the button to buy a portfolio. So consequently, we see demand for those standard strategies, and we consider gold in our management company. We see it more and more not as a separate tool, as a separate investment product, but as a component of a larger investment product. And then you just watch my hands. If your ecosystem allows for it, then you can add to your existing investment products some services. This is how investment saving, which is a micro service for Tinkoff Bank, when they use their debit cards, when they do shopping using their debit cards, and some of those funds automatically are used for investments, including gold. And to summarize my presentations, I would like to say that client's profile has expanded from traditionally those who were adding to their portfolio some gold to hedge risks against risks, and those who use fintech technologies, advanced technologies. So this is what our clients look like of Tinkoff Capital. Alexander, thank you so much for that. Sergey, could you tell us what is going on with banks? So what standardization issues are you facing, and what is taking place in terms of opportunities? Colleagues, from the perspective of the current status of retail market, which is being shaped currently, it keeps being shaped, it is impacted by the situation, by the global situation, and it impacts the markets and its trends in Russia. The pandemic demonstrated that retail market of traditional banking products, retail market of the organized market, they still exist, and it's fairly large. Even in these conditions in which we find ourselves, when some traditional banking products as bullions are too expensive for a retail client, because they include additional value like VAT. Not everybody's willing to pay for it, but other products with that high demand for them speak to the fact that there is an interest. And my speech is mostly about analysis of trends in 2020 and 2021 in the retail sector, and perhaps in a forecast of where it's going to go forward from here. So speaking of today's situation, standard banking products that we see in the market, so metal accounts, investment coins, and bullions, and organized market is about all the products which are circulating Moscow Exchange. So like colleagues mentioned before, ETFs or mutual fund spot market, future markets. So you have a multitude of products. Speaking of traditional banking products for clients, so basic entry level for unqualified investors, the demand for coins of precious metals, primarily gold metals, grew significantly in 2020. That demand persisted throughout 2021. At the same time, the situation when locally there are shortages, there's not sufficient supply from banks in terms of coins, so they drive the demand up, and we see it doesn't come to an end. And those volumes that the Bank of Russia emitted and supplies to the market, they're purchased throughout the year, they're not enough. We need more. At the same time, we all observe that experiment of the Bank of Russia to issue new types of golden coins with St. George, and not everyone took that experiment. Some people were skeptical about it. Why do you need those coins? But the market demonstrated that clients took it normally, all the new things in the market, even such things as new types of investment coins. So that's a product that was very clear and straightforward. It became broader, product range became wider, so you have different sizes of coins, which are larger and smaller, and each one of them found a client. So that's a positive. It had a positive impact on the growth of that market, and the central bank pretty much doubled emission of investment gold through those coins, which was a good thing. The following year, we don't see in the plans of the central bank the same thing. So you don't see any new investment coins in their emission plans, but we see them in their plans for 2023. That instills optimism. So maybe it's not an experiment anymore. Maybe it's an ongoing situation. Maybe it'll have a continuation, just like in the international market. We see something like that. And that practice in the Russian market should also be continued and be repeated from year to year. With regard to the ways of implementing or introducing banking products, we have also seen some development in a major way. In fact, last year I gave some statistics on the number of lending organizations that offer to their clients an opportunity to invest in precious metals. And of course, it was dominated by the banks that offered coins, then metal accounts, and some banks were dealing in bullions, but there were fewer. So this saw a positive trend this year. The number of banks and services with the remote sales of all those services, their number has gone up. We have new players even among banks. Because of the new licensing system for banks, there's no need for the bank to have a separate license for precious metals. It's part of the universal or basic license. So this is how we started. We had new players in the market, and so they discovered that market for themselves, and they started to study, to get a feel for it, and to started to look for clients and counterparties. Among old players, we saw some changes in sales channels because of the pandemic and because of the closure of the offices. Many banks and associated organizations, they started to run programs to switch to remote sales. And so with marketplaces being put in place, or window shops for those physical products that previously were not accessible to clients, like internet shop basically. So banks become internet shops from that perspective, and we observe this, and we see more and more such players in the market. So we count dozens of them already. From the perspective of other positive trends that should be mentioned. So when we talk about cashless or digital assets, so we talk about metal accounts, so they fight for the client, so that fight becomes about price. So you want to get the client because of a better price that you offer. And also it's about access and time allocated for the operation. So Tatiana Fitz mentioned that at the first session, so precious metals and gold in particular should be accessible to client 24/7. So 24/5 or 24/7, it becomes more and more common for those cashless products offered by the banks, which is a positive once again. Another thing that should be noted here, when we talk about this year's trends and some trends that will continue next year. In fact, the main thing is that borders become fuzzy between physical metals and digital metals, what colleagues described in their previous presentations. So ETFs are replicated in physical metals when you buy metal in the spot market, so at an exchange, and also may include those metals that are in the storages of Moscow Exchange. So those borders becomes more fuzzy. Those barriers are not there anymore. So in that respect, we are helped by the implementation of the system of government control on the circulation of precious metals. And we remember from the first session very well that the cancellation of VAT on bullion operations is linked directly to the launching of that system. So once it happens, digitalization of sales of bullions without VAT will be counted as operations on metal accounts, or maybe some cross flows might be possible, so with your account balances can be changed, transferred into physical volumes and vice versa. And it will become more and more like what we already see in other countries abroad. So gradually we're getting there. Regulatory landscape is changing little by little, and those products become more and more accessible, and investments in them without additional costs for basic level clients, that becomes more and more accessible. Speaking of forecasts, going forward, so digitalization of that process will continue. Additional value will be created for these products when client does not just buy an investment, when they need to time it, when it should be synchronized with a different event, or when those purchases are linked to other banking products or services. So we'll see more and more of that. We'll see some development of this. Like Alexander described, there will be a link between non-precious metal products with products which directly have to do with precious metals. So those borders become fuzzier. So when we talk about traditional assets, coins and bullions, and going forward, it may be true of those digital assets that are tested in our country little by little, and eventually that will be also characteristic of the market of precious metals. So these are possible trends going forward. Thank you for that, Sergey. It's nice to hear that one of the largest banks gets involved with individuals, with retail customers, and to sell them to individuals, and you do it also online using digital channels. Igor, Asian Pacific Bank is one of these most important banks in Far East and in Siberia. So can you tell us how it's working out compared to the previous year? So do you see any changes? So what we see coming to an end. So the season of gold mining for alluvial gold comes to an end. It was a good year because client base was really added. We have We have 170 gold producing companies which are clients. Also, volumes are up, transactions are up. Consequently, I would like to note that not always the Russian market was able to consume all the gold produced here domestically. Just all the other banks, we work in international markets and we find ways to sell those precious metals that we purchase here. And it should be noted, unlike the largest Russian banks, we are somewhat limited in our capacities internationally. And so this year we have seen some demand from international partners, and we expanded geography of deliveries. But sometimes it's no secret that the best international banks, they tend to work only with the largest Russian banks. So which is normal, and we also look for opportunities in the Russian market, in the interbank market, and also organize trading at the Moscow exchange. And I should also note this, that this year we were pleasantly surprised that you discovered a new strategy for us. When we work at Moscow exchange, and we use this tool, which is ruble denominated.
Then it was a pleasant trend that we see better spreads. The true of professional participants would be of that opinion. If you use just gold for hedging, like troy ounces and dollars versus rubles, so this is a more interesting tool to use, but to us there are certain benefits. So if it's out of season, know that refineries, their deliveries will be lower. So for a bank, it will take time to build on a stock for precious metals. So given the rising rate of the base rate, and also use the orders or the at the exchange that we can sell gold and profit from that. So we have signed an agreement also to open our local London accounts. So we'll be trying and trade in dollars per ounce. So yes, there are interesting spreads at that exchange. Probably these volumes are not high enough for professional participants, but again, relying on spreads, we can anticipate some further development of this instrument and probably will be using it in our operation. Another trend for this year is that we have a higher stocks for gold and our accounts that are being held by major gold mining companies. So in 2020, we saw a drastic increase in the price. So many gold companies also received revenues far greater than expected, so that provided them with this kind of financial cushion. So the price has corrected this year from its peak. So, but obviously we see that our clients, they're not selling their gold because they are waiting for the price to change. So over the past week, I think, over the past several weeks, we saw that at 9% program in rubles. However, there is no surge in activity on operations involving trade in gold, so they don't move assets from their accounts, because my point is that gold mining companies are waiting for better times to sell their gold and precious metals. And another thing to be noted, that the level of metal that is of precious metals that are held by the bank and our operations through the Moscow exchange. What we did is we used that metals, relying on swap operations against ruble, so that we used market rates and that was something new in our portfolio for this year. So these are the bullet points that I wanted to share with you today. So we'll be developing our cooperation and transactions, and I'm excited to see the future developments in the finance market, including this changing behavior of gold mining companies. Thank you for listening. Igor, thank you very much. And actually, I'm pleased to hear that exchange is one of the tools that you'll be using for your financial transactions and also one of the ways to attract funds. Ivan, so you represent actually the industry involving precious metals, both domestically and internationally. Could you give us that international outlook overview? So what are infrastructure aspects to be taken into consideration? So thank you very much. So I'd like to say that actually we are being traded on the Moscow exchange, and we know that there are swaps, operations, and orders that are placed. So looking at the local markets versus global markets, so this post-pandemic year is a challenging one, and there are problems that have exacerbated. So that this problem that I'm talking about, the one problem that can be solved, and that would enable us to use these opportunities at the local market and then to make projections with respect to the global market. So the infrastructure of the global market is very closely related to the Russian, to the local market, and it's no secret the way in which the trading operations take place across the globe with the physical metal. Just to reinstate our theme, so there are several global centers for trade in gold. London, for one. So most of metals, that have been traded there. So next comes Zurich, and it was in 70s, the 80s, when Zurich became one of the major centers for trade in physical golds and plus platinum group metals. So that these are the OTC, over-the-counter centers. But if we look at the exchange side of trade, that would be New York Comics. So this exchange has been a major exchange, the largest exchange in the world in terms of trading volume since 1970s. And then China, so it was in 2004 that they started to liberalize the market for gold, and the exchange started trading operations. So currently this SGE is another alternative for futures and also orders for physical deliveries. And now let me explain more about the mechanics of the markets. So the global price will be linked through this parity, expert parity, and then arbitrage trade comes into play, and we get some reasonable price at the end. So that this can be the discounted price, or in some regions, or we may see a premium in others. From the infrastructure perspective, so the question is in which way we could use this arbitrage trade just to make the use from the discount price, just if we trade between two regions. For the Russian market, we clearly see that the output is on the rise, and based on the statistics for 2020, more than 340 tons of physical metals produced, 320 tons extracted from the subsoil, and it is clear to all of the market participants that the year 2020 just demonstrated that the global market was actually this London-based market and London-tied deliveries. So this slide clearly shows that it's 290 tons out of 320 tons produced. So these 220 tons were exported to the United Kingdom. So for the local market, there are specific requirements or grades. So they can be seen as standard grades ingots. And yes, we can get them delivered to London, and then we can even register it in our account. So, but this global arbitrage trade, and for the rest of the world, China and India, so they're receiving this 1 kilogram, so 995 and 9999. So this will be the ingots received in those markets. So once there is an opportunity for arbitrage and trade, then we just need to get the metal from the account and then to deliver it to a specific market. And this needs to be done very quickly and in the form of gold that will be accepted by the market in question. And this raises another problem. And I can explain what kind of problem is it. So, right, for Russian refineries, so it's not so hard to produce gold in different formats. So ingots or bullions. So it's not about the format, but it's about the timing and delivery. So the time period between the order received from the customer and the final settlement on the transaction. Now looking at the actual data, so we see that from that global perspective, if we want to export our metals, so we want to take the metal away from Russia to bring it to another location where the demand arises, then we'll have to go through this export procedures. And on this slide shows actually the breakdown of export procedures, and there are export procedures in Russia on the left-hand side, and also the export procedure in Switzerland on the right-hand side. So the Switzerland is the major center for trade in gold ingots and also for ingots of other precious metals. And we clearly see that the procedures in Russia are more complex. In addition to custom clearance, we'll have to go through the process of the state control and inspection, and this may take from 2 to 5 days, so it has no connection with the customs clearance whatsoever. So this is actually an obstacle to us for a specific transaction, because this is the way the market is operating, because the transaction needs to be executed now and here, so that the customers are waiting for us to confirm on the date and time, and we cannot confirm the time because of the regulations that are in place. So we lag behind, and this is something that is playing against us in terms of international competition. Looking at the competitiveness of Russian metals, again, and judging by the global market situation, so apart from London market, so we see that this is an open question, and you would agree that this time frame for procedural clearance play a very important role, because we see that the premium may turn into discount and vice versa. So in the market, things are changing very quickly. So we are being a global player in the gold market. So we have to find sources of supplies abroad, because it's easier for us to bring the metal from a foreign location to the destination, and that would take less time to ensure the delivery, the prompt delivery to the customer. In addition, there's another factor, which is funding, and Igor has just mentioned that rates are rising, and it is clear to our customers as well, to clients. So if they don't place their metals again, and that they want to export the metals abroad, then again they will have to get through this clearance process that takes several days. So if we factor in this current level of the output and the rates, then we'll see a very significant number, that is more than several billion rubles. So that there will be also some losses on our side in terms of the timely delivery of the metal. That would be 50 cents as a premium loss, which is less significant if we take a number in rubles, so that's 350 million rubles. So therefore, we would like, what we're doing, just we expanded our presence across global markets. However, our just the key message is that we want to be present in global markets and supported by the metals that are produced in Russia. So, and for us, it is vital to get it quickly delivered as part of integration and also harmonization, to make sure that we are implementing the best practices, and these would enable us to go through the process within 1 day, which is the case in Switzerland, for example, like 24 hours, and you can look on your transaction. Now looking also at the current situation locally and globally in terms of gold transactions. So in 2020, we saw many new opportunities for arbitrage trade, which I mentioned already. So, and we used our infrastructure, and we saw that we could buy metal from one market, and then get it delivered to another location. So they just played with the parity to receive this profit from arbitrage, and then to make this netting exercise to reach a fair price according to the market law. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my views. Thank you so much for your intervention. Could you be more specific in terms of examples? So Turkey, India, the markets that were of greater interest to you, if you could share a couple of stories with us. And by the way, we have another question to Igor from the audience. So I'll start answering the question that was raised to me. So looking at the global market and on its demand side, we see major consumers, and therefore a lot of stories that happening just during the current period and over the pandemic history is such. So we'll look at India and China. So there are instances where we see demand for gold that translate into premium for the metals, and probably this high-profile story that happened a year ago, and that was the about arbitrage opportunities for gold, and because of spread between the futures and forwards, and that was back in March and April 2020. So there was sport versus comics. That was like the nearest future, the future for April back then. And again, this depends on the infrastructure. So, and if this stock and the metal, if the stock is there, and this can be delivered under the contract, so that the opportunity was there for 5%. So just buying on sports and selling the futures. And there was a follow-up in the Chinese market. So you may be aware of the fact that they have orders for both physical gold deliveries and also futures. So last year, so there was a very significant discount that which stood at $50, but now they're trading with premium, and again, this premium trade is yet another opportunity for arbitrage in gold. Thank you very much for your explanation. So, Igor, so now one question to you from Alexei. And about Vladivostok, there is an infrastructure platform for just stocking and for custom clearance and the state inspection of precious metals. How do you think, is there any chance that we can use it for the purposes of wider trade? Yes, there is a chance, such chance, and we know that banks will be just using finished products that will be ingots, gold ingots, and so their purity will be the highest as compared to the international products. And then for Russian, you would have even like 5 nines, so which is a rare case indeed, and these products can be received from refineries only. So those gold mining companies that operate in Russia, including the Far East region, so they just deliver their material to the refineries, and then the banks will be taking the metal from the regional refineries and on to Moscow, and from Moscow to other countries. So this can be either exports or just exchange traded products. So this is an interesting site. I mean, the infrastructure platform in Vladivostok, but I don't see it as a hub actually in the future, in a hub for precious metals. So this is something that you meant that they can use it as a site, I mean, for transportation, so that we could send our products to other destinations. Yes, so we can gain on the cost of transportation, but these are only assumptions, and in theory that will work, but in practice there is a long way to go, so this needs to be promoted across banks and market participants.
Thank you, Igor. And as being moderator, I would like to show you slides how stock exchange markets of precious metals have been evolving this year. So here's what we see at exchanges. We see the number of private investors that doubled in 12 months. Now it's 15 million people. At the same time, even though the price over the last year has not reached maximum, so it has had even a correction. We see that future on precious metals are growing in volumes, and the share of individuals, it's the right-hand side of the graph, so reached 42%. And as stated before by my colleagues, net assets of funds are growing, so we see that graph, so that's over 20 billion rubles. So spot market, we see that trade volumes are growing as well, so by manyfold we see the number of trading. We see a lot of companies in the banking sector, banking organizations that see that the market in 21 So new players join, non-banking players. When we talk about market development or involvement, we see that for March, trading starts at 7 in the morning, so that it helps clients located in Far East to more actively trade. We made a reduced minimal lot to make it more accessible. So it's used to be 10 grams, now it's 1 gram. So you had to have at least 40,000 rubles for that minimal amount. So now it's 4,000 rubles. In terms of developing tools to incentivize internal demand, we changed some of the rules. So with Tinkoff Capital, they add gold to their portfolio actively, and we provided an opportunity to do transactions with providers of liquidity, like with London Gold. We provided additional access to ruble liquidity. So repo with clearing certificates of participation that include precious metals. So speaking of these last two ones, so you see trading stack. So with a minimum lot of 10 ounces, it's traded on spot conditions and in line with London market regulations. So liquidity is aggregated from various sources. So you can be spot market, or you can transfer the position. And what is important here, that the quality spread is really good, 0.08, that helps you to manage risk, and you can use it for selling metal. In terms of attracting ruble liquidity, first transactions took place in July of this year with certificates on precious metals, and you can see here that basically liquidity is related to the key central bank rate. You just need to open a general pool, you need to open an account, and within a day, very promptly, the balances that you have in you can attract rubles against that balance in precious metals. So thank you so much, your colleagues, for your speech. And now let's move to the session of Q&A. Let me focus on this. We'll try to be very brief, very much down to earth. We talked about various tools and products, and if you were asked, if you were just an individual, not private, so what tool would you prefer to use to invest into precious metals? Anybody? I have a large experience of using gold ETFs. A long time ago, they were not ETFs issued by Finex, but they used to be ETFs as part of mutual funds on gold. It was this use of gold was very positive for me at the time during the global crisis, because gold was really saving those portfolios. If you had some gold, if some share was in gold, that was a protection for your portfolios. So shares are going down and gold saves you. So the most comfortable way for me is a ETF. And they're accessible from Russian platforms. I never bought gold instruments anywhere. If I had a 12-kilogram bullion of gold, I don't know what I would be doing from it. I don't know where to store it. I would be very concerned about it. And I don't know how much I will have to pay for it. But if you have an ETF, I have no concerns about that, because if I have a banking app, so that's very comfortable, and it's a liquid instrument as well. Igor Ivan You wanted to respond as well. I would probably split my savings. I do like physical gold, and coins are a very fitting option. Okay, they come with a surplus, but because, you know, they come in smaller forms, so they don't have to be linked to anything, and they're also tangible. If we talk about speculations, so in a different organization we used to develop an internet bank for retailers, so for individuals to trade in precious metals, and the spread of 2 rubles, something like that. It was incredible at the time. So with lower prices, so prices were 2 or 3 times lower per gram, and 15 ruble spread was incredible at that time. So I do like this idea that at exchange, the also lot was reduced to 1 gram. I think I would use that instrument. Thank you, Ivan, for that. So being an antagonist to this, I would say my position is that, on the contrary, I don't see any physical component to my investments in gold. And we said before, when we talk about not only about conservative players, but also those who are young but educated, and many of them have risk appetite. And in my case, gold futures are an ideal fit, because it's a transparent procedure and very variable margin netting. You know how much will be written off, how much you'll be getting, etc. And the most interesting opportunity here, that you can have a short sell, you can sell the metal, because not all the some instruments help you to buy and have a long position, but if you have an overrelated asset and you would like to sell it, you can earn on its price going down. You like derivatives? Absolutely. So let's move to the next question. So we all heard the first discussion about canceling VAT. It's been discussed for several years. So all of you work with clients. So is there a demand from the clients to cancel VAT for gold? Do they want to own bullions? They want to take them? They want to own them. I think that management companies, I can speak for our clients, it's a separate category of clients. They will not be buying bullions to take them home. They enjoy liquidity, so that's not that important for them. Okay, I also made that comment. When we got started back in 2014 and 15, we had a discussion about a gold fund. And they said, wait, gold ETFs are not needed because we have coins, we have bullions, and we have futures. So gradually we have this client base that don't even think in terms of bullions. Because according to Moscow Exchange data, ETFs and mutual funds trade, their trade covers about 1 million people. So a lot of people think the same way as I do, who do not understand the structure when you buy gold in bullions, and they don't want to think about spreads, etc. So VAT discussion involves professionals and those who are thinking about buying bullions. Say, why do you have such a spread when you have small bullions? We know about that, but once again, our clients decided some gold products for themselves. So BTF or ETF at Moscow Exchange, they select between them, and they speak less of coins or bullions. A management company provides a benefit, or one of the advantages. And perhaps it's not as interesting for you to see the situation change. So what banks have to say about this? So from the perspective of retail, client base that we all have, So it's very different for all of us. And those clients that come for some basic banking products to the office, those are different clients. Those that contact management companies and those who want to be involved with Moscow Exchange. We have discussed all the type of instruments, and it is for whether it is important for them to have VAT there or not. If they consider investments into precious metals, we see that. We see that in our statistics. We see that in central bank statistics. On all lending organizations, there is demand of that, even if you have VAT there. So also for physical precious metals in bullions. So maybe it's demand for silver is greater. So, but normally entry ticket is lower compared to gold, but demand for gold is covered by coins, investment coils, that has a premium on it. So what if happens if VAT is cancelled? Will we see greater demand from individuals for this product? It will be greater, I think, but of course, even coins and bullions have different consumers. So the first question is, so those who buy bullions, okay, they face this question, where do I store it and what I do with it going forward? So even now, banks start to provide infrastructure of buying them back. So only a few banks provide that service to clients, including our banks, regardless of where the bullion was purchased. So they can contact Rostoch's bank with that request. But as this market develops, that infrastructure will be provided also by other major retail banks. And some competition will be in place between metal accounts and bullions. So whether it's metal that you store in the bank on your account, or maybe in your home as a bullion, and the next thing will be this seamless flow of physical metal into digital one. So when banks will accept physical bullions to make it easier for clients to store them, and they will be also, if they contact banks, and they will be able to provide them to them back without VAT. So if individuals will have much more growth, will have a much greater demand. Yes, we will see some regrouping because everybody is looking at the entry and price. If there's a risk for account holders, so they can switch to coins and then to bullions. So coins are a different story because it's not only about banks, it's a larger market that what banks are able to cover. So we will see some regrouping of clients, so with bullions and metal accounts. So let's move to the next question. Today had a very interesting presentation in the second part from Norilsk Nickel. Denise was talking about platinum and palladium, how those markets will be evolving. So do individuals have an interest for them? So are there any demands, requests for platinum or palladium? Alexander, I can say this. Clients do have those requests, but it hasn't been satisfied. Moscow Exchange doesn't have any ETFs for platinum or palladium. But to develop such a product, we need to have infrastructure in place, and also we need to understand how large that demand is to make sure it's profitable and we're able to cover costs. And then where that product can be used, how can it be included in other investment products or services. So there is interest on part of our clients, and they would like to have an opportunity to invest in those instruments, but at the same time, that opportunity is still lacking, or it's very minor, maybe for some investors, those who work in international markets. Thank you for that, Alexander. Anybody else? I was asking Denis during his session whether he sees any investment demand for platinum metals, and so what supports or restrains that demand, because I wanted to hear that from him, because he comes from Norilsk nickel. So, but his answer was somewhat different. According to our data, as we see them, so clients who are able to invest into platinum and palladium, we see that there is a demand for it, and demand is not huge, but it's for several categories with metal accounts. Those who are fans of platinum and palladium, and their demand can be met only through metal accounts because coins and bullions are less accessible for these metals to be purchased. So if Moscow Exchange will have metals from this group, so secondly, so in the banks there was a chance to cover risks with those spot deliveries. So we'll have a chance to better quotation and provide metal accounts to them, because they will be able to trade. Will provide trading opportunities to their clients going forward. Thank you for that, Sergey. That was interesting to hear that. We'll keep that in mind. Ivan, do you work with platinum or palladium? And what is interest in international markets? There is a lot of interest in international markets, but the thing is that if you look at the balance structure of platinum metals, so the share of investment demand in them is fairly small. If in platinum we have a share of jewelry consumption, but palladium up to 85%, it's auto-making relating. Investors that come to banks, as Sergey said, so they have only one instrument, and once they see the prices for palladium, and we know that palladium demonstrated a lot of volatility, various spikes, and out of four metals, when they see prices for one of them is 5,000 rubles per gram, they think, do I buy it's at that price, or do I buy it's like silver, 50 rubles, and people are afraid because it's expensive. So from that perspective, demand for palladium is not major, but bank operations are still going. And if you go back to the initial statement in our presentations, so we are overly regulated, and you know that rates for palladium and platinum, so on balance, it's expensive to have them on your balance. So in the same procedures of obtaining a license for exports, so you know it's not a time, it's a one-off license. So you can imagine how much time it takes before the transaction is signed. You need to obtain the documents, you need to export it physically. So it's quite terrible. So because you basically lose all of your profit, your margin. So to summarize, its investment interest should be supported and developed. It exists, but its volumes are still not clear. So it's mostly about industrial consumers and their difficulties in terms of issuing one-time licenses and time needed. It's not so clear. So that's about platinum. How it's different from gold. Another question from Tinkoff Capital. Alexander, when you launch your fund, you replicated some Western ETFs and you switched to physical gold. So can you comment why and what was the idea behind that step? We We didn't want to replicate gold or any other portfolios. It's no secret that competition is a good incentive to do something new. And you want to improve your product, the more competition it's there. When you have mutual funds, exchange mutual funds, and we also have ETF for gold, which is traded at Moscow Exchange, and others may join, so we should be ready for it. And thirdly, it reduces fees for clients, because clients who buy shares in mutual funds and that has shares of other ETFs, they do not understand what they're paying double fees. So to avoid that paying double fees, we exited those ETFs, and including gold ETFs. So that was economically driven, that decision. So to win your clients and to win in the future competition. Another quick question: are there any interest from insurance companies or pension funds? So for pension or retirement benefits, you can use gold and precious metals and physical gold. So those institutional investors globally, they have quite strong volumes of investments in precious metals. So what do you see here among your clients? Anybody? I can start and tell you that our clients are mostly individuals. So for that reason, demand for our products from insurance companies just does not exist, because we have worked with individuals. But for other products, I'm not so sure there's a major demand from insurance companies. I can add to that. We see some demand for ETFs from institutional players, because it was not a clear product, but eventually they figured out, they started buying it, and they are an active participant, insurance companies that is, but it's not so much about packaging, it's about the essence. And Russian institutional players, and maybe you have other experience, but they do not understand why do they need to have gold in their portfolios. If private investors understand what gold can do for them, then institutional investors think that they have a forecast how gold prices will behave, and then if you have 10% and you will have a better combination of profit to risk ratio, so he most likely ignores that kind of consideration and opts for something else. Anybody else would like to comment on this? Most likely, this is a good trend that we see more and more consumers of those products who join precious metal markets, not only insurance companies and investment funds or pension funds that consider those options of investing in precious metals or endowments, so that this domestic market that in our country we still have not had. And those data that we saw on slide, when 300 tons are produced and 300 tons are taken out of the country, that tells us the domestic market is missing. And any such developments instill hope that colleagues will sort it out and will learn those new instruments and appreciate their attractiveness for their portfolios. And you're welcome to use those instruments. So through the banks or through exchanges, and companies can choose and pick depending on their investment manifestos, and they will be using the different tools. Thank you, Sergey. One more question. So we already discussed this information system to track precious metals and how it's linked to canceling VAT. Do you see any problems in this area? And what is your approach in your bank? Are you working with them on this, like with the Federal SA Chamber? You talked about it. What are your expectations? So now they talk about January the 1st of 2023. Maybe it's more about banks, because management companies are less affected by it. So, Igor, I can share a few words about that. We also participated in those discussions, and banks take it with understanding, this new initiative. But the main problem that causes concern for us, I'm saying this on behalf of the banks, so when the deadline comes to make sure things function properly in that short period of time, and we need to ensure it does not impact current banking activities. Other operations for major banks that have a lot of large branch network, so that poses a risk. But market is actively involved in the process, and so we have our good hopes. Let's hope it works. We have seen some positive impacts from the implementation of the system. So far, understandably, lending organization will face the problems in implementation and entering the system and putting their balances on track to be tracked in the system, and participation in daily updating information following transactions. But it has been rolled out and it has been tested with industrial consumers and players, and we've seen some impacts. More and more industrial metal consumers turn to banks to buy metal in bullions by banks. So what we see is a flux or redistribution of flows, so that metals for industrial consumers are done in that way. So channels used to be different, and now banks start to be considered as suppliers of those raw materials. So that gives me hope that it will be growing. Thank you for that, Sergey. Ivan, in your presentation, you noted that government control timeline was expanded from 2 days. So do you think transition to this government information system will help to accelerate, or can we hope it will be 1 or 2 days you tested the system? Can you tell us anything in greater detail? I hope it will help. In any case, automation and single approach and single registry should help to streamline those processes. At the same time, automation with regard to export operations and government controls, we face such processes when representative of the same structure is present at the plant, where a certificate is signed on receipt, and when that metal is through the bank is exported, that person is also present, doing government control, where they check that certificate is the same, even though it was done before. So in that respect, we hope that it will help to reduce the timeline, and it will improve competitiveness of Russian metals globally. We have a question from the floor. The question, how Moscow Exchange looks at the operations of Shanghai Exchange and prospect. So it's a question for me, so I'll be responding. We work with the Shanghai Exchange. We are national clearing center, participates in trade at Shanghai Exchange. We have obligatory issues, so what accounts we can use being a central counterparty. So hopefully we'll resolve those issues going forward, and next year we'll provide a service to the participants so they'll be able to trade on Shanghai Gold Exchange. So, which might be a good thing for all the participants here. So, colleagues, maybe you have some quick questions. Vladimir, I have a comment to what was said. I found this interesting parallel when I looked at the list of all the bullions in our fund, and I discovered at some point that in our London storage, among all our bullions, so all the bullions we have were made in Russia. So they started asking me, so did you do this on purpose for the Russian market? No, no, no. But Russia has a lot of impact on this market, on local London. Many bullions end up there. So it's good to have this industry, and it's good to have multiple instruments to work with. Thank you for that, Vladimir. So let's summarize our results. Generally, new opportunities do come. In terms of markets and tools, we see some growth. We see a greater offer for various clients, but we also have some challenges, which are mostly related to our operations, to our documents, to using new IT systems and interaction, and how promptly our clients are provided with those services. I think those are the key things to make sure our clients get the products of highest quality. Thank you all for participating in this discussion. Thank you.